Okay, planning board, you are live and you are recording. Go ahead, please.
Very well. Thank you very much, and welcome to the March 16th, 2022 meeting of the Town of East Hampton Planning Board. We have 4 matters on for work session. 1 is a sub-waiver review, 3 are site plan reviews, and just a couple of matters in our regular agenda. So we had anticipated being live and in person at the town hall, but that does not seem yet to be viable. When it does become that, we will move there. So for now, let's start with Egypt Lane Realty Modification. That is Will is going to cover that for the planning department. Sharon is the point person for the board. And I understand the applicant is with us on our LTV. Sorry about that. That's Mr. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. So Fernaris.
Yep, Fernaris. How's it going?
Very well. Just so you, in case you don't know, the way this works is the planning department will give us an overview of the application, give you an opportunity to respond, and then the board, in this case led by Sharon, will discuss the application.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so with that, Will, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, this is an application to modify a sub-waiver that was originally approved in 1979 for the division of about 13.5 acres on the west side of East Hampton, Sag Harbor Turnpike at Merchants Path into 4 lots that was later amended by a resolution. Hang on, I'll show you on this base map here. You kind of get a better idea of those 4 lots. The applicant is requesting to modify the original sub-waiver for this lot, which was for this lot located at 105 Merchants Path, in order to permit access via a driveway from the property to Merchants Path instead of access through the flag strip that is described in the original sub-waiver and covenants. The original approval stated that legal access to the 4 lots would be via a common driveway from East Hampton Sag Harbor Turnpike via flag strips for lots 2, 3, and 4 to resolve title problems concerning the ownership of Merchants Path, reportedly owned by the town trustees. This common driveway would have partially run through and over Merchants Path's location in the flag strip, and you can kind of see the edge of the flag strip here. Despite this, the de facto access to those lots came to be from the paved and travel roadway of Merchants Path. The sub-waiver resolution of approval was approved to be modified in 1997 in order to allow one of the lots to have legal access to and from the existing Merchants Path, given that it had already been used as the de facto access since 1979 in lieu of a constructed common driveway along the flag strip. Given that the common driveway was never formally constructed or put into use, and that Merchants Path is still by default the primary source of access to all the lots along that road, the applicant is therefore proposing that they be allowed to modify the existing sub-waiver for their lot as well, allowing them to take access from the proposed dwelling on site from the more winding distant Merchants Path, as you can see here, via a new driveway that would connect the property to the road instead of building a driveway to partially follow the flagpole on top of Merchants Path for approximately 800 feet east of the proposed dwelling. That would require clearing more trees and natural vegetation than the applicant's proposed driveway. In order for this modification to be approved, there were 2 legal determinations that must be made. It must be formally determined who owns Merchants Path. As mentioned earlier, it was reported to be owned by the town trustees at the time of the last sub-waiver modification in 1997, but this needs to be confirmed. Additionally, it must be formally determined who owns this thin adjacent lot that sits between the road and the applicant's lot, where the driveway is proposed to be constructed across. It may be owned by the town, but again, that needs to be confirmed. The approval will be required in order for the proposed new driveway to run between Merchants Path and the applicant's lot. So in conclusion, the planning department doesn't really see any reason why the applicant should not be allowed to move forward with the current sub-waiver modification, given it would not impinge on the current use of Merchants Path at all. It has historical precedent in the previously approved sub-waiver modification for the neighboring lot. But again, those legal issues need to be cleared up regarding the ownership of the lot and the adjacent lot and Merchants Path. And the board should discuss any issues they think should be rectified as well in order for the modification to be approved.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fornaris. Anything you'd like to add?
No, Mr. Highland summarized it pretty well. So just to summarize, I represent the owner on this, Musa LLC. I'm from Greenberg Traurig, 2317 Montauk Highway in Bridge, Hampton now. I'm going to work on just confirming exact ownership of Merchants Path there. I saw the note on the agenda. So I already have a message out to a title company just to get me some more clarification there. And I'll check with the highway department as well. And then I'm also going to clarify exactly what's going on with that flag strip, because there was, I'm not sharing my screen now, but the property, the lot 23.007 right now, that one did have the waiver, the amendment. And I believe they just conveyed an easement for road widening purposes when that was approved in 97. I don't think there was a quick claim or any kind of conveyance. So I'll double check on that, and we'll take it from there. I don't believe there is a common driveway agreement for all of these strips. So there is, my client has the right to access over 007's land, to get to 114. So it's not directly applicable to what we're talking about now, but I will get some clarification there. My only follow-up was whether the planning board had whether it was going to be, how do I want to say it, an easement over the town's land here, or will it be, or just a simple quick claim deed to my client to then build the driveway over the town land?
I think that may be something that you'll have to deal with yourself.
Okay.
We're only involved in the planning issue. How you and accessing Merchants Path, and whether we're going to approve that or not.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the disposition of what may or may not be town land is
Of course. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was a preference on your end before I go next to the town attorney. So, okay. No, that's. The answer was what I was looking for, essentially. So,
well, it's not legal advice. Just the limits of our.
You don't have to tell me. But no, I appreciate that. And if there's any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I think this all makes sense.
Okay, appreciate it. Sharon?
Yeah, no, I agree. I have no issue with them trying to figure out how to do this legally. It makes sense. I mean, if you don't clear cut all the woods getting up to this property, I think it's, better for all of us, but they have to figure out the legal issues. But as a proposal, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. Do any of the board members have a problem with it?
Sam, I had a question. Given the issues with crossing town land there, if in fact it's town land, which can be, very tricky for the town to convey an easement or quit claim over land. There's usually a rather complex process for finding town land surplus and et cetera. Or if it's considered parkland, we all know that's even more difficult. So I was just wondering where the common driveway crosses Merchants Path. If you were just to open that section from Merchants Path to this lot up to the house, would that be something the applicant would be interested in? I know there's some slopes leading up to the house, but just seems like it might be a simpler way to go than to try to get rights to use town land.
Sure. And the owner did consider that. And I mean, it is a backup, of course, but there's a couple issues there. One is there's about, there's a couple 100 feet of trees. That was one of the main issues we wanted to try to address and to clear as little land as possible to get there. Two was the slope that you referenced. It's a little difficult, not difficult, but it's just another layer to it to get up to the house there. And then 3 was the nature of how Merchants Path, I'm not sharing my screen, but the way the asphalt part has a pretty, I'm going to call it significant, but it's more or less a blind turn because this is all wooded area around the paved area, Merchants Path there. There's some concern that it wouldn't be safe essentially with a, let me share on my end, hang on. Bear with me 1 second. That blind turn there is an issue, and I'll point it out a little bit more in a second while when I share this. So let me just let this load on my end, and I'll share it onto my screen. So this is a pretty, I mean, I don't want to judge what's significant or not, but if we got access here, because there's other houses up and down Merchants Path on each side. So I can't speak to how much traffic there is, but there's enough where there's some concern that you're going to have cars going around here where there's street area and it's blind. And then also people from 114 coming through to get to 6-Pole Highway at the same situation. So if we can get it, in a situation where it's a little more direct to turn on and off, that was preferable to my client, as opposed to having it on, essentially 2 curves, which was just based on his experience planning on the site. It was a concern, something he noticed as having some experience building and developing in this area. That's the first thing he told me when we met. So that's why we're pushing for this access that's a little more direct, with, of course, a couple items that we have to clear with the town.
Randy raises I mean, look, as far as I'm concerned, if Sharon raises the first good point, which is, as long as the clearing is kept to a minimum, but, it doesn't quite matter, at least from my point of view, as far as what the planning board's, involvement is regarding the town land. But Randy raises a good point. If it is, in fact, parkland, and I don't know if we can tell that looking at the map, that raises a separate issue.
Of course. And I actually pulled the title to that, how the town acquired that parcel of land. It was in connection with, there's another sub-waiver north of here, McIver it was back, I forgot the exact date, but he quitclaimed or conveyed this land to the town in exchange for access somewhere. I forgot which specific lot it was, but it was in connection with one of the lots just to the north of Merchants over here. So I did confirm that it wasn't CPF or parkland or anything, anything that would restrict the town possibly conveying an easement or title to my client for this purpose.
Well, thanks for doing that. It's thorough. Does any board member have any other issues that they want to raise regarding this application? Or is it safe to say that we that we can support the proposed modification? Anyone? Michael, you just said support. Did I hear you say the word support?
I did say support.
Okay. Does anybody, to make it easier, does anyone not support?
I would prefer the plan B.
Okay. Very good.
But, I mean, if they can get, I think the fact that piece of town land was conveyed by a quitclaim doesn't necessarily mean that but this is something they'll have to work out. I just think it's really simpler to go over that little portion of the old approved flag strip. That's how I feel.
You don't think that'll mean more clearing, Randy?
Well, it means a little more clearing, but it doesn't involve any of these issues about the use of town land for an access, and it's already approved. It's a I don't even know if they need our approval for it.
Let me ask a real question. Well, do you happen to know, is this water recharge? This is water recharge over, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah. I mean, Randy, if it's water recharge overlay, the less clearing, the better, I would think. But
there's a couple hundred square feet. I'm not going to say it's significant, but it's a decent amount of trees. We calculated, I can get a better number, but it was between 700 or 800 feet more of clearing. I don't have the width of that, but to go from, say, here up to there. And then we also have to deal with a well location that would be right in that proposed driveway. So, and we have a conservation easement on the back, a buffer. So, it's the nature of the property. I understand that, but that's part of the consideration of why we're shooting for, a more direct driveway. for this house, for this planned house.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they're willing to do the work to get it legalized, it's a better option.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you got here is 4 members saying they agree and 1 with reservations. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Appreciate
Great.
your.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, board.
Okay.
All right, have a good night.
Okay. Good night. Next is Faro Beach, which is Marco is on for the planning department, and I'm looking for Ms. Bistrian. You're on this one?
I am, and as is Andy Hammer, but I believe he'll be on the phone.
Very well. Okay, and like I said, Ian is the point person for the planning board, and in his absence, I will step in. So, go right ahead, Marco.
All right, so this is going to be just an aerial view of the property. This is below Lake Montauk, to the south of it. So this was an application that was last reviewed in March last year. This was this was submitted for existing renovations that were already made to a number of resort buildings. Stop work order was issued in February 26, 2014, and the applicant has applied for approval of decks, trellises, interior renovations, and converting the office building to a motel unit, reconfigure the existing parking lot, and create a new parking lot, as well as install a new low nitrogen sanitary system. The lot itself is in a residence district with Harbor Protection Overlay District. It does have frontage on Lake Montauk, South Lake Drive, and Montauk Point State Boulevard. The Montauk Motor Court was constructed on the site in the 1950s, and a single-family residence was subsequently constructed, also prior to zoning. A CO was issued in 1986 for 4 rental structures, each having 2 units for a total of 8, an office and a single-family residence. The use itself, the commercial use itself, is pre-existing and non-conforming in the residential zone. The office has been eliminated and is now being utilized as a rental unit, and the size of some of the remaining units have been reconfigured and enlarged internally. Regardless of the conversion of the office to a unit, there appears to be a reduction of the number of units from 8 to 7 through an internal reconfiguration that created units. The planning board had reviewed the last submission, requested that the applicant seek documentation, that indicates the existing cottages are pre-existing and non-conforming. The applicant has submitted information based on the CO that was granted in 1986 that was detailing the 8 pre-existing and non-conforming units. As they are currently designed, the units are considered to be resort units given their inclusion of the kitchens. So the parking requirements of the town code does require 2 spaces for the single-family residence and 1.25 spaces per bed in the motel units. The site plan, which I'll put up right now, and I'll zoom in a little bit. So the site plan does indicate that the applicant is required to provide 14 parking spaces. There is a second access from South Lake Drive that was cut into the southerly part of the property, which was involved clearing native vegetation without a natural resources special permit and creating a roughly 7,150 square foot parking area. This is proposed to be a new parking lot containing 12 spaces and is to be surfaced with quartz gravel, which is the recommended substrate for HPOD overlay district. The planning department recommends the park be moved to the central area, which is to the north, where there is an existing parking lot. The current location places it over 150 feet from the nearest unit and over 350 feet from the farthest unit. The site previously operated with no parking in the southerly portion. It appears that all the spaces could be located in the central parking area. Aerials indicate that around 2013, this parking lot, the center parking lot was expanded across previous lawn area, likely to accommodate for additional parking. I'll just quickly show that across a few aerials. This is what it was in 2021. If we go back to 2016, it still looks mostly the same, but obviously you can see the clearing is still there. And then we go back to 2013, which is where how it was previously developed. So this area is not, it was vegetated, and this whole area was lawn.
Marco, I think you may have gone back and forth there between 2016 and 2021. If you could just make sure that you show us 2016 and show us 2021 again, if you don't mind.
There's not too many differences between 2016 and 2021, but I just want to let you know that.
Yeah, what are we looking at right now? What's this?
This is 2016.
Okay.
And
2021?
In 2021, the southern areas were the grass started to grow back in patches.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The stop work order was issued in 2014, so after 2016, it's kind of just regrew over time. But really, the time frame in between the changes was between 2013 and 2016, at least according to our aerials that we have. The department does recommend the applicant submit a layout that would accommodate the required parking in the central parking lot. Although the parking spaces would be located closer to Lake Montauk as opposed to the southerly lot, the area would not add to the square footage of hardened surfaces. It would not be substantially different in practice, as the center area has been historically utilized for parking. The central parking spaces are located over leaching galleys of the new sanitary system, which could utilize load-bearing covers to support vehicle parking. Let's go back to the plan right now. And it's noted that, in another recent site plan, the Surf Lodge, that also includes an extensive leaching field under a crushed shell parking lot. The relocation of the spaces may eliminate the need for the variance from freshwater wetland setbacks and an additional access point which was cleared without the appropriate permits. It is noted that there are several wetlands near the southern side of the lot, which I'll just scroll down a little bit so you can kind of see where the shaded areas are, where the flagging has denoted where the wetlands are. And it would be further development on an area that was previously vacant. So during the previous discussion, the board had not reached a consensus on whether to relocate all the parking spaces to the center and revegetate the access, to reduce the number allowed for only the residents, or to allow for the full parking of 12 spaces. The applicant has redesigned the parking lot into a configuration that has increased the setbacks to freshwater wetlands. However, it would still need a variance and an NRSP from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So last year, the submission, the parking lot was less configured in a square shape as this, and rather more as a straight rectangular line, which, would go straight, will be closer to the wetlands, and it was reconfigured to be in a more squarish shape that pulled a little bit further back. However, it still needs those appropriate approvals and permits. So it is noted that half the parking spaces of the new lot are within variance setbacks. Although the setbacks to wetlands are within the jurisdiction of the zoning board, the planning board should discuss which parking configuration would be in the interest of good planning with respect to distance to existing improvements and increased development in environmentally sensitive areas. So the project, as noted, also involves updating the sanitary system, the antiquated sanitary systems, to a centrally located new low nitrogen sanitary system. The most recent site plan does indicate a minimum 4-foot separation, vertical separation to groundwater, which is the requirement for the standards of HPOD. The applicant has also submitted a revised site plan and building plans that detail coverage, clearing, and the use of the site. The applicant has submitted a letter from their engineer regarding the on-site fuel storage, noting it meets HPOD regulations. The applicant should clarify the type of fuel that is to be stored and their use. The department also notes that it states that there are still 8 cottage rental units, and that should be revised to a resort use with 7 units. In addition, the site plan, building plans, and landscaping plan should contain the proper project title of Faro Beach. The application was originally filed under the name Faro Beach site plan. However, it's a minor weird typo where there's one that has an H and one that doesn't have an H. So the applicant can clarify which one it is, just for sake of consistency and clarity. The lighting fixtures, upon 2014's initial review, lighting was changed. So the applicant should just submit pictures of the lighting fixtures that are fully shielded. They have submitted those that are fully shielded. However, those details such as lumen levels, Kelvin levels, wattage, hours of operation should still be submitted. The applicant has submitted a plan containing details in regards to revegetation, which I believe is this one here. So there is roughly 2,000 square feet of native vegetation not located on the site's property that was cleared, which is roughly over here. That was to create the access for the new parking lots and areas that are create the access for the new parking lot. There are revegetation, so there's revegetation being proposed around that new southern parking lot and towards Lake Montauk. The planning department notes it does consist of northern bayberry, American beach grass, switchgrass, and a little blue stem. The department recommends the applicant should clarify the total square footage to be revegetated on the landscaping plan and site plan. Comments from the fire marshal have found the project to be ADA compliant. The department noted earlier that the applicant would need a modification or a new application before the zoning board of appeals. Prior to sending planning board comments to the ZBA, the applicant and council should clarify if the application is to move forward as a modification or a new application. So in conclusion, the application is incomplete pending the revisions that I've mentioned. The planning department should reach, the planning board, that was my typo, should reach a consensus as to the placement and layout of the proposed parking.
Marco, before we go on, just let me ask you a question. What's the zoning board application modification? What would that involve?
It would just be modifying the previous approval, which I believe was in the 80s. There were certain questions as to if it's still counted as a modification or if it's required that they should submit a new zoning board application. I think that would be a question that's probably best answered by the council and the applicant.
Yeah, because what I'm wondering, are they in compliance with whatever the ZBA told them to do back when, or is there an issue?
So one of the issues, so for the zoning board, how it was, as far as my memory goes, is
Hello?
that originally, distance, there were 8 motel units, and then one of those was converted into, so as a trade-off for the single-family residence, one of the 8 rental units was converted into an office, and it wasn't meant to be used for living space. However, and it was CO'd, I believe, in 1986, with those changes being made and approvals being followed. However, some time after that, the office was converted back into a rental unit. And so that's one of the reasons why they're here before the planning board and before the zoning board as to how that is to be approved, denied, or amended, really.
I want to get a sense of that. All right. Okay, Ms. Bistrian, please go right ahead.
Good evening, Chairman Kramer, members of the board. Britton Bistrian representing Faro Beach, Inc. And Andy Hammer is also with me as well on the phone. I don't want to waste too much of the board's time. This has been under review in front of this board, I think, for the better part of 6 years. So we're happy to comply with all the data. You know, that H keeps actually appearing in a lot of town documents. It's the Faro Beach has one H, not two H's. And we will revise that title. We will add the square footage on the landscape plan, the lighting. We'll make all those revisions. I really think this is a discussion on parking and maybe the ZBA issue. So just to be factually correct, there was a ZBA decision on this property in the 70s. This property received a stop work order in 2015. And as a result of that stop work order, I filed both a planning board application and a zoning board application. Joanne Powell was handling it at that time, and it got lost. So I suspect that there's I can prepare the file for you, but we have a pending zoning board application for this exact proposal. I don't think we'd need a modification because we've never gone to hearing. There was a subsequent document that Andy submitted that was a modification to the 1972 because that was the guidance that we had received to make the use conversion. And that modification itself was denied by the zoning board. And then Andy got a determination from Ann had gotten a determination from Ann Glennon that wasn't required to modify that. So we have a pending zoning board application. It's been pending for a long time. I don't believe that we need to submit a similar application because it's never gotten to hearing.
Can I just ask, what do you mean, what wasn't required? You said something about getting an approval from Ann Glennon, but you said that wasn't required. I'm not following that.
I might have Andy step in here, but my non-legal interpretation was that Andy had submitted to modify the 1970 zoning board decision that was they were allowed to build a single family residence if they abdicated the residential use on cottage one. Subsequently, Andy went to Ann Glennon, who made a determination that the office as an accessory use to a motel could move anywhere on the property, and that modification was not necessary. Andy, are you here?
Is that determination in the file?
Yes, it is.
Am I unmuted? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you are. We can hear you.
Okay, so essentially what it came down to is the zoning board determination had a condition that when we applied for, how to interpret it, her position is the office is part of the resort use, regardless of where it was located. So the condition that said that, the use for a resort, it was essentially it was part of the original resort use. There wasn't any distinction between it. So by reducing the number of units, we were able to then repurpose that, and it was not a change of use, essentially, is what she said. So that's why, but the zoning board, my recollection is they denied the motion to rehear it or something, and that's why they said, well, you should go to the zoning board or to the building inspector, and we submitted that and got that determination, which I think therefore brought us to this point.
So that explains why you have 7 units rather than 8 in the motel.
That's correct.
Okay, but how does that relate to what I'm going to call the house on the, what would that be, the south end of the property?
The house was granted by the zoning board as a separate use, is my recollection. We got rid of, there were, how many, geez, this thing is years and years old written, but my recollection is there were more units, and we merged some of the units together, basically, to get to the current number of units on this site.
Okay, so the house is a separate affair from the 7 units plus office that's on the northern end of the property.
So the last CO is for 8 rental units, a single family residence, and the office. And we're going to 7 units and a residence.
Okay.
As far as I remember, it was basically that one of the conditions was to allow the house, and in part to maintain the same density was to remove one of the units in one of the buildings, and so. That was, CO'd, that was agreed to by the applicant at the time, and it was CO'd that way. And over time, the space, I believe it was the office, was reconverted back into a rental unit. and there was a whole back and forth as to how to go about it. I think the applicant wanted to basically remove that condition that was in the approval, stating that they had to remove that unit in place for the house. However, that application was filed as a modification, and so I don't believe that would have involved a hearing. However, so the zoning board wanted to have a hearing, and so that modification was, in some respects, denied. There's a little bit of question as to how it's being handled on the zoning board side of it, but I do understand that the zoning board does want to have a hearing on this kind of application. I think they might have had one and then might have denied it, but I'm still a little bit lost on that side.
I believe it needed a motion for rehearing, and it didn't survive that, is what I recall.
But that was solely that was solely on the modification of the 1972 decision. Prior to that, 3 or 4 years, whenever this initial zoning planning board application was submitted, I submitted both an NRSP and a planning board application at the same time.
Yes.
And the modification came 3 years later, but that NRSP application for the initial stop work order in 2015 has never gone to hearing.
What about, so just so that I'm clear, the small building that's on the northern end of the application, that's the office, right? On the
site. Unit now.
I'm sorry, that's a residential unit now?
A resort unit.
Correct.
So
on the north side, the south side is the residence, so the north side would be a rental unit, resort unit.
But what I'm saying is, I'm looking at 5, forgetting the residence, there's 5 resort units, correct?
Yes, and they were CO'd as 8 resort units. They were CO'd as 8 resort units. At some time prior to our client's purchase, it was not, they were operating as 9 units. Take the single family residence aside. Our proposal in front of you is what exists today, which is 7 units.
So that's...
Aren't there 2 units in those big buildings?
Yeah,
No.
that's what I thought. The 3 that are together on the right side, on the, if you will, the northeast side, those have 2 units in each, 2 resort units in each of those buildings?
No.
There's one unit.
The first one has 1, and the south 2 have 2, for a total of 5. Then the other one on the other side is 1 and 1, so it's 7.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. And so where is the office for the?
There isn't one.
There isn't one. So where would the office then go?
Motels don't really operate with this kind of use. Doesn't really have an office all that much anymore. They can run it out of.
Welcome to the modern world. Yeah. So because I thought what you were saying before was that Ann Glennon gave you authority to put the office wherever you wanted to put it. That was, at least I thought.
Well, it's an accessory to the primary use of resort, so it's not a separate use, basically, I guess, is what the determination said off the top of my head.
So what I'm trying to get is a sense of what I'm looking at in terms of what are resort units, and I'm looking at two buildings with 2 units in them and 3 buildings with 1 each. Correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
And I can go through the building plans if you'd like, but this is the first unit, which is to the north. That was the very north one. And this is the one to the south of that. This is 1 unit as well. Then we go to the 3 ones that are clustered together, the 3 bigger ones. So unit 3 is 1. And then you have 4 and 5 next to that one, and 6 and 7.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to get a sense of what we were, what we're dealing with here, and how, and the parking, the amount of parking we have is what over there, not over there, but what's required for those 7 units?
14.
14 would be. Okay. All right. So now
the total site parking is 14.
Total. Okay. Does that include the residents, or I guess the residents?
Yes, I believe that does include the residents.
That does include it.
Okay. All right. So the question.
And we it's required is 14, and we're providing 16, just to be clear.
Okay. And And that would be 12 in that proposed southern parking lot, and 4 in the northern parking lot, correct?
Correct.
Which is the ADA spaces are in the closest.
Before, okay. That's good to know. All right. Do you have anything else that you want to add on this one?
Well, I think we did want to address the suggestion that all the parking be put in the middle, because, you know, the intention here on the owner is to not have parking on the site. As a matter of fact, we would like an opportunity to redesign this, because this was designed to be kind of an open space with grass, you know, kids running around. It wasn't designed to have the parking lot. You know, we think the aesthetic, you know, there are other considerations other than, hey, just, you know, let's put the parking right up to the unit. We think it's actually going to be a much nicer site, and that was the intention all along, is to try and create these, you know, the parking lot in the area, which incidentally, there were approvals to put that parking lot in at the time. This wasn't some guy who just went out and did it. Britton can probably go through the story, but you know, this probably isn't we'll submit that in writing, but you know, it was approved by the building inspector, et cetera, et cetera. And then it turned out that they reneged on that at a certain point. But the reason they wanted to put the parking there was so that they would have a quieter, more naturalized site that would lend itself to, you know, a better environment for the guests, rather than having a large parking area be one of the central landscape features you're looking at. So, you know, I think we can take a chance at redesign, you know, a little bit of a redesign on this thing to soften it. But that, you know, saying just put all the parking in the center corridor, I think really ignores a bigger issue, which is we didn't want to. You know, it's a different site entirely. If you stack 14 spaces in a row, you've created a parking lot with units next to it, not kind of a really nice cottage resort use that we think could be incredibly, you know, the aesthetics of which will be much improved by, you know, a little thoughtful design of parking and keeping the units away. People don't need to access their cars once they get there. They would drop their stuff off and then park in the parking lot. You don't need to have your car right in front of you when you're staying in these units. And that's kind of why it's, you know, the genesis of this issue originally.
Yeah, all right. No, I understand that. I mean, you're still going to have four spaces there under your plan.
Yeah, and
we wanted to have an area to unload, and we also wanted to put the ADA spaces, because those obviously, there's a reason to have those much closer to the, you know, to their use.
Goes without saying. Marco, could you put up the photograph, the overhead photo of the way it looks now?
This is still the 2021.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to, you know, sometimes it's easier.
And I think if you wouldn't mind, could you scroll to the 1962, just as it relates to the south end of the property? Because I think it's going to be a helpful visual to see how much of this lot is regrowth as opposed to natural vegetation. Can you pull up 1962? The whole southern end of this lot was a cleared lot. I think those tax maps are slightly off, but.
There you go.
And there was an access onto South Lake Drive historically at the south end of this property, as you can see.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's hard to see, but I can see where. Oh, look at that there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think it continued across the property.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the modern world and look at it as it is now, because that's where we are. That's current, Marco. That's 2021.
No, this is 2004. I can go back just immediately to the present if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like that. All right. I mean, look. Do you have Mr. Hammer, Ms. Strin? Do you have anything else you want to add on this?
No, I guess I would just have one question for the board, because or just one statement. We did, and I have a photograph from the last hearing where I can't remember if it was the planner or one of the board members that actually drew the rectangle parking in the south and made it a square and sort of redesigned it for us. And that's what we took back to the engineer. So we really were
Eric
following
Chance
exactly
did that.
what we were asked to do.
I remember it was Eric.
But we have the ability in this discussion, after I saw that TAM, that maybe I make unit, the southernmost unit on the east side, which is 7, maybe that becomes the handicapped accessible unit, and the rest of that and when the 4 parking spaces go adjacent to that. It may reduce the amount of parking, the impervious surfaces on the property, and, get the aesthetic that the client's looking for. And I guess it would be helpful to know if that is moving in a direction that the board would like to see before we, go back to the engineer and redesign the parking lot again after a pretty long road.
I'll obviously I'm going to hear from the rest of the board. My biggest concern is that you're dealing with a harbor protection overlay district here. And, the less clearing, the better is really what it boils down to. You open up that other lot down on the bottom there, leaving aside whether it was properly cleared or improperly cleared and those kind of issues, dealing with the reality of what it amounts to 2 parking areas where you can probably, in fact, I'm sure you can accommodate all the parking that's needed in only one of them. Might require a little configuration. It might require parking over the leaching fields like Marco suggested. That was being done elsewhere in Montauk. That's a concern of mine. You can see how close it is to Lake Montauk. It's a narrow parcel, and I'd like to try to protect the harbor protection overlay district, not do damage to the harbor protection overlay district. But I'll put it up to the board. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
Well, Mr. Chairman, just before I did want to
go right ahead.
That is inconsistent with what the board told us at our last appearance.
Well,
this was not brought up. So, we kind of tried to follow their guidance. So that's kind of where we.
I don't think there was much. I had the planning department check, and I don't think there was a whole lot of unanimity about this. There was, in fact, I think, there were some folks who were okay with it, and some who weren't, and some who were undecided. I think I was one of the undecideds, and as I'm going through this application and thinking about what's important from a planning perspective, it's the HPOD thing that I'm getting caught up on. So I recognize that this has been going on for a while, but also there've been clearings and things that shouldn't have happened, and you've got issues with the ZBA that don't seem to have clarification quite yet. So we're in a process. But I'd like to see what other board members say.
If you don't mind, I'll jump in.
Please go right ahead, Lou. I'm looking for anybody who wants to take a hand. Go ahead.
The first thing I just want to mention is that comparing 1962 and using that as a model for what should be is ridiculous, because in 1962, I think, was the year around that time when they built motels on top of the dunes in downtown Montauk. So there was a lot of things going on in 1962 that we would never dream of doing today. The other thing that I wanted to say is I understand why the applicant wants the parking in the south side of the property. It's perfectly understandable. And the reason, as they've mentioned many times, is that it's an aesthetic reason, because the people who are staying at the cottages don't want to look out the door or the window and see a parking lot. However, the way I see it as a planning board member, if I have to weigh that, the violation to the residents' aesthetic values to an environmental concern, putting the parking near wetlands, closer to wetlands, and also cutting down vegetation, an area that should be really revegetated, is a no-brainer for me. I mean, yeah, it's nice for the applicant to have it that way for aesthetic reasons, but I think the overarching concern is an environmental one, especially in this area, so close to South Beach, South Lake, an area that's been deluged with bacterial problems from outflow, drainage outflow, sanitary outflow. So to damage it even more is just, you know, a non-starter for me. So I would insist on the parking to be located where Marco suggested it should be located.
Thank you, Lou. Does anyone else want to weigh in on this? Anyone? Randy, Sharon, Michael?
Sam, I
Go ahead, Randy.
have a couple of questions. I wonder if you could put 14 spaces in that northern lot and meet all the, you know, the turnaround requirements and that. I'm not sure it would fit. So I don't know that anyone has tried to lay out a parking lot at northern piece there.
Randy, are you considering the parcels that are presently not parcels, but what might be an extended series of spaces after number 4, which are right now not dedicated to parking?
I see what you mean. You mean we'd go right on the property line, which I guess we can waive the setback.
All right, yeah.
And you just have, it looks like you could put maybe, I guess you could fit 14 there. I don't know, Marco, did you do any like measuring or?
I did some rough measurements.
Yeah.
Obviously, it needs to be on a survey.
Okay. All right. So I hear you. So you could pull in up to the property line if we waived. I guess we can waive the setback for in a residential zone for pre-existing non-conforming, or does it have to be commercial property for us to waive the setback? In which case they'd have to go to the zoning board for the parking variance to put them that close to the lot line. I don't know if there are any wetlands there either. If there are any wetlands near where those new spaces would be.
Randy, can I clarify, just to answer your questions there?
Go ahead.
So the planning board is not allowed to waive accessory structure setbacks on a residential property, which would be the case here. However, that area, as you saw in the aerial photograph, is already developed. So, they would just be changing the substrate. I don't think that would be interpreted as needing what would be a property line setback variance. At the very least, if you did treat it that way, the 4 spaces already need such a variance. But I would call your attention to the fact that, you'll see right in the middle of that access lane, it says 23 feet. You need a minimum 24 feet right behind a parking space, which they've designed there. So if you did continue that line of those 4 parking spaces further to the south, I think you could meet, you could get at least 12 spaces there. And then you could have the 2 spaces for the residents offshoot a little, like kind of where that bend is there. But I've scaled it out. It works. You probably wouldn't even need to put parking on the other side near those 2 cottage units to meet the parking requirement. But
Okay.
That's just to clarify your comments.
So Eric, where would you get your extra foot for, you'd go sort of northeast to get the extra foot for the aisle?
I think the way they've drawn it, I mean, first of all, yeah, you easily have a foot there if you just move that access lane a little bit. But the way they've drawn it here, the parking spaces do meet the setback, and you could fit them in there. But there's room for at least one row of head-in parking and a 24-foot access lane easily, and that would mirror the existing parking configuration on the site. So,
And what about the ADA, the discussion of the ADA for that unit there?
It's the same situation as far as it's a little bit different in the dimensions, but for what we're talking about, it's actually a width issue, and that's not the problem here. The only difference would be that those would have to be concrete or asphalt as opposed to quartz gravel, but that wouldn't really factor into it. That the dimensional change for an ADA space has to do with width, not with depth.
Okay, I mean, would you put them on the west side or on the east side near the unit? I guess it's close enough. Is it close enough that it would meet the ADA requirement if it's on the west side of the property?
Yeah, there is no actual, because every property's different, there is no actual, codified length that, a maximum distance you can have between an ADA space and a building. You just need, the code recommends that it be as close to, in this case, one of the units would have to be ADA accessible, and that you have an accessible route, which is what they've actually drawn on this site plan. You can see it. There's one ADA space. That's the northernmost space. And then they've shown a walkway, which presumably would be concrete. I don't know if there's a notation there.
That black striking, that's part of the ADA space.
Yeah, that's the lane or the
right, the access.
And then a ramp, maybe. I guess a ramp. Once you're okay. The other questions I had are, in terms of septic, the proposal, which is a great thing, that these would go on a new alternative system, and is the idea that all of the units and the residents would go into the new system? That's a question, I guess, for the applicant.
Yes,
that's
correct.
what's drawn.
Okay. Well, that's great. That's a great thing. The other question I had was and Marco raised this, there's some fuel storage tanks. Are we talking propane, fuel oil? Could we talk propane?
We have one 275-gallon fuel oil tank, and the board asked that we get an engineer to certify that made HPOD standards, and that was put into the file.
Okay. So no, the idea of switching to propane, which should be a non-hazardous material at this location, that's not really in the cards at this point.
Well, the tank is double walled and it meets the HPOD standards, so
okay,
that's something we need to.
And is that tank provides fuel for all of the units? Or?
I can't believe that would be possible. I don't know the answer to that. I know there's a fuel tank next to Unit B. There's no other fuel tanks on the property.
So I guess I'm still curious about, how do all these other units get their heating fuel, including the residents? Doesn't have to be answered right now. That's really it for me.
They're not year-round units.
I don't believe they are heated.
Are they? But they're not winterized?
No.
I mean,
no.
So these are
seasonal.
These are seasonal. I mean, do you care if we have that in the approval, that these are seasonal units? I
don't think you can regulate seasonality, but I don't believe these things are vacant right now, and I don't think they've ever been occupied over the winter.
That's how they do business. It seems to me that's a how they do business question.
Well, it goes to the wastewater flow. if they're occupied year round, and there is, I guess they're going to have to satisfy the health department. But if the health department says
We already have we already have a health department permit on this. They issued it without a determination from the board, since they didn't recognize what we are in site plan approval for as something that they have jurisdiction. Because just to remind the board, this site plan was triggered over the addition of decks, trellises, and a parking lot,
so the health department
and the reduction of the number of uses.
I mean, it'd be interesting if we could have a copy of the health department approval.
You have it in your file.
Okay, we do. Well, I would ask the planning department just to take a look and see if the health department approved wastewater system based on seasonal use.
They did not.
I don't believe they're allowed to. The only thing they're allowed to give you is seasonal use for outdoor seating at a restaurant, I believe is.
And a pool house.
Give you.
So their flow calculation, I don't know if we have it on this plan. Do we usually get the flow calculation on here?
I think it's on Plan C1, Marco, if you happen to have it.
So, all right. So anyway, if they approved it, and they approved it based on certain assumptions about the use of these units and how much wastewater they're going to generate, which I guess it would be good for us to, we haven't got our electronic system up yet. So in order for me to find that, I have to go down and go through the file. But it'd be...
Thank you for that advertisement, Randy.
Anyway, so I have some questions about this whole year-round use. You know, there's a lot of pressure on cottages like this to be used year-round because we have such a housing crisis. And I think we have to address our housing crisis, but I don't know if we want to do it by having the supposed seasonal units in a sensitive spot used year-round. So I just would like to know how the health department calculated the flow and that the use of these units is actually consistent with that.
The health department actually calculated, this is in your file, but they actually calculated for eight units ranging from 150 to 225 gallons per day, depending on the square footage on a single family residence.
Okay, well that's
so we're one less unit than they approved.
So that's pretty good. I don't know if we know how this property would, does it have enough land area to meet that flow today, or are we just talking a grandfather situation here?
It's grandfathered at a higher flow than what would be permitted today. But I just like to maybe clarify two things. First of all, you know, Marco mentioned it in his presentation and in his memo, and Britton and Andy mentioned it. They are reducing the number of units as part of this proposal from what was approved with that CO in 1986. They're reducing it by 1 unit. So we see that as a very beneficial aspect of this. The planning department's position right now is really that we don't agree with that southern parking lot area. And we don't really see the need for it and the additional clearing that results from that second access cut. But I would also point out, just to clarify about the ZBA situation, first of all, I think where we're going with this is that it's going to be a new ZBA application. It's something that I'll discuss, you know, Marco and myself and council will discuss with the applicants, but I think we're looking at a new application. The whole issue of whether or not there's a modification or a new application came up because that ZBA approval from the 70s that permitted the residents, there was a very specific condition that said the northernmost unit may not have any living quarters in it. The idea behind that was to not increase the number of housing units on the property. Now, not only are they not doing that with this application, they're actually reducing it by 1. So we don't actually have any objection to that. it was really just a matter of the procedural, what technically do we need to do procedurally, because that condition said you can't have a living unit in that northernmost unit, and they want to have one. We don't necessarily object to that, or I shouldn't say necessarily, we don't object to that. But it's just a matter of figuring out how that's going to get resolved in front of the ZBA. So that was kind of an aside that's a little confusing, but I just wanted to clarify that. They are actually reducing density as part of this proposal, and we see that as a significantly positive aspect of the proposal.
And I would also point out we're upgrading the sanitary system voluntarily. There's no requirement that we do this. That was offered by the owner here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that front northernmost system, all of them, I mean, are going to be routing their wastewater back further away from the lake into that alternative unit. So that does look like a plus. I'd have to agree with Lou about the clearing. It looks like the clearing calculation, this property is way over what we would allow now. So I would like to see more revegetation or that alternative parking layout. So that's it for me, Sam.
Thanks very much, Randy. Sharon, Michael, do you guys have anything you want to add on this?
Thank you, Sam. My only concern is the parking. Everything else is very positive about this plan. And I agree with you, Sam, when you say less clearing is the better. And when I go on vacation, I'm in my car every day to go somewhere, to the beach or the driving range or the wine store, so access to my car, I would like it to be nearby. So that's my comment.
That's an empirical view.
Maybe some more screening, vegetative screening.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think I agree with the, less clearing, the better. And there's no reason to have two parking lots on this property. It seems like it will fit in that central spot. And, I apologize if somehow we led them in a different direction the last time. But it makes sense to me.
Okay. I think now, Mr. Hammond, we've got the direction more clear, and I think with greater unanimity than was previously the case. So,
could I just add a couple comments?
Please, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
We're hearing your comments like we did last time, and we will take them back to the client. We will come up with some sort of creative redesign that reduces. We heard the comments, increases vegetation. I just want to be clear, Mr. Cortese's comment. The reason that I showed the 1962 aerial is that in clearing in the town of East Hampton is not of secondary growth. So my purpose of showing that was to show you that the clearing that was done on the southern side of this property was in an already cleared area, and the growth that was removed is what they call secondary growth according to East Hampton Town Code. It wasn't the purpose of anything else other than that. I just want to be clear on that.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for hearing us. Assuming you have nothing else, we'll see you the next time on this one. Go now to, I think we have the JQG site plan special permit, and looking at my cheat sheet, this is Marco has this one, and Lou, you have it, and the applicant, I see Mr. Whalen waving his hand, so it's Mr. Whalen's for the applicant. Okay, go right ahead, Marco.
Sure. Just give me 1 second to pull up the aerial so the board members have a sense of where it is. So it's highlighted here. This is Springs Fireplace Road, and this is Queens Lane, and this is Cheryl Foster's path. So this was an application, just for the board's memory. It's for a fence-in gravel-based facility and for the portable sanitary units, supplies, and vehicles for storage of those on the parcel that already contains a legally pre-existing non-conforming single-family residence, which is this one to the south. The second use is proposed to be a storage yard, which is permitted in CI zoning, but it's not specifically defined in the town code. It is cleared of natural vegetation and it's within the South Fork Special Groundwater Protection Area. The applicant is seeking support from the planning board for a change in the town code to allow properties zoned CI, commercial industrial, to be allowed a second use on the same property as a commercial use, notwithstanding the existence of non-conforming single-family residence. So the board reviewed this application and recommended that the applicant make an application to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the required variances from the town code. The planning department recommends that the planning board send formal comments to the zoning board regarding the requested variances, the use of the site, and the design of the site. So this was originated in part due to a code violation for operating a commercial use what is considered a residential property without the site plan approval. The commercial use was operating there for over 15 years and will require variance for the maximum number of uses. I have in the memo listed the definitions of commercial property and residential property. The board might remember this very similar topic from an application we discussed a few weeks ago. So I won't fully repeat it here, but the applicant has made an application to the ZBA for a number of uses. But we should, the planning board should look at those as well. So the planning department estimates there are about 26 other properties zoned CI with a residential use, and there's over 30 other commercially zoned properties with a residential use. Obviously, granted site plan approval will impact the other properties that operate another commercial use. And the planning department notes that without change in the town code, the applicant will need to seek the approval of those variances, remove the residence, or remove the commercial use itself. So the applicant proposes to provide access to the project site via 76 Queens Lane, which is also owned by the applicant. That is the parcel to the north, the triangular one to the north. This lot here has a previously approved site plan, I believe around 1990s. And due to its unique shape, it was approved to be a storage yard for vehicles. And there are details included with that evaluation stating that the applicant has agreed to only have vehicles, such as including boats, automobiles, and trucks, utilized with the applicant's recycling business. I don't know if that is still happening, but no other materials of any kind, including trash collection, will be stored on site, and no space will be utilized by other parties. There's supposed to be existing vegetation as well, including on the 20-foot width of Dayton Avenue, which is a paper road, which should be left in its natural state and should not be cleared. There's also other trees to be planted along the front of Queens Lane. In the memo itself, you can see pictures, excuse me, that the vegetation, some of the vegetation has been removed over time. That was supposed to be maintained. So this property, 76 Queens Lane, would need a new site plan approval if the application before you today were to be approved. The applicant is also seeking, although the applicant is seeking the variances from the ZBA, the issues such as the access to the site and use of the site should be addressed by the planning board. I should probably put up the plan now, so you kind of see what was last reviewed by the planning board. They have submitted an application to the ZBA that has a slightly different survey, but there's not much difference. The only difference is that there's stated to be a proposed access easement here, and that the dirt driveways that go across a different property are to be removed. But other than that, that's the only difference between the survey that the ZBA has and the planning board has in terms of the last review. As with this proposed project, it's going to be additional use will likely not require a sanitary system upgrade, but the existing system is most likely an individual septic system. Sorry, I might have misspoke, but the existing site is increasing the site parking requirements with the addition of the commercial use, and that. However, the town considers the parcels a residential property and thus may not require a sanitary upgrade. My apologies there. The planning board had discussed that it was important that the existing residents remain as is, since there is a severe need for housing in the town of East Hampton. The planning department notes that although the housing is a critical issue within the town, the existing residence is considered as a separate single-family residence that is not beholden to the affordable housing standards as defined by the town. So in conclusion, the planning board should consider the factors identified above regarding the use, access, and design of the site in their comments to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The proposed variances will likely have substantial planning implications in the town of East Hampton and may be more appropriately addressed by the town board.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marco. There's a thorough report. Appreciate it. Mr. Whalen, you have the floor.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You can all hear me, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, let's just start with the use issue here, because that's really the heart of it. The town code, we have a commercial industrially zoned lot. Those are pretty scarce in the town. I think you all know that. The way the code reads right now, if you have a residence on a commercial industrial property as the only legal principal use, which is the case here, you're not allowed a second use. Now, this is true, even though, as again, you know, commercial property normally is entitled to 2 uses. We only get 1 use on the property because we have a residence on the lot. The residence is a non-conforming use in a CI zone. So even though, now you can get a special permit to enlarge a legally pre-existing residence, but residence is an X in the use table in the CI zone, meaning it's prohibited. So we have the anomalous situation where, because we have a non-conforming use on the CI property, we can't introduce a CI use. Now I'm going to leave that logic to you. I think there's 2 possibilities here. One is that this is an unconscious act of the town board, because I think it dates back to the original 1984 zoning code and the use tables at that time, and they really didn't, you know, this was a action or consequence that was not thought through. Or if you assume that all legislative acts are presumed to have a purpose behind them, then the object here then is the zoning code is encouraging commercial landowners who have residences on CI property to remove them. The situation here is that, and this is, as far as I know, the situation, these facts still pertain. There was a husband, a wife, and their niece, long-term East Hampton family, living in the house. There's a pretty simple solution. As you're going to see in this discussion, the house is central to all of the issues, because if we remove the house, this becomes a very simple site plan application. My client, you know what the business is. He has portable sanitary units that he trundles around the area and rents them. The last 2 years, because of COVID, business has been poor anyway. Hopefully it will be better in 2022. But for the last 2 years and now this year, he's been forced to rent other property to run his business from, because we've advised him, don't run your business when you don't have a permit on this property. So he's going into the 3rd year of that circumstance. Let me explain. Let me give you the timeline here too. So this was before you last in January of last year, 2021. We're 13 months later, and you know where we are? We're exactly in the same place that we were in January 2021. In January 2021, we came before you, we explained the situation. We asked if you would be willing to, recommend a code change to the town. The planning board was non-committal upon that. So we submitted a variance application to the zoning board in February 2021. That is 13 months ago. The only variance that we need is the second use on a commercial property where you would normally be entitled to 2 uses, but we're not entitled to 2 uses because we already have a residence. So the variance application was submitted in February of last year. In September, we got a letter from the zoning board. The letter really addresses part of what Marco was talking about in this memo here, and that is that because our access is coming from the north over, I guess it's 76 Queens Lane, there are some things that are inconsistent with the approved site plan, which I think dates back to 1996 on 76 Queens Lane. We regard those as relatively minor issues, but in any event, we addressed them by resubmitting the survey that you see right. Actually, it's not the survey that you see right here. Yeah, there we go. That survey that you're now looking at. And we show a proposed access easement over 76 Queens Lane, basically in areas of that property that are already cleared and being used for driveway access. All right. It's not entirely consistent with the approved site plan, but Jeff Reich, who was an attorney, works for me. Jeff would be here tonight, but he had another engagement. He wrote a letter back to the zoning board because the zoning board wrote us the letter in September. He wrote back with that revised survey in October. And I'm going to quote one paragraph from his letter because I think this is where we are still today. Jeff wrote, "We are aware that there are minor conflicts between the site plan for 76 Queens Lane as approved by the planning board in 1996 and our proposed new access. In our view, those conflicts can only be resolved at the planning board level, and the only sensible way of doing this is for the zoning board of appeals to first grant the requested variance and then, before final approval of the site plan for the subject property, for the applicant and planning board to modify the existing site plan for 76 Queens Lane." That is exactly where I am on this today. We would like to have a hearing before the zoning board, to which we submitted an application, again, 13 months ago, over a year ago. Still no hearing. We need either the town board to change the code, and we're not going to wait around for that. We need the zoning board to grant us relief so that we can have a second use. If this doesn't move very soon, I really have to go back to the client and say, I know that you're doing a wonderful thing for the people that live in this house. I know you don't want to tear their house down, but very frankly, the only way out of this and the simplest way out of the dilemma for the landowner is to tear the damn house down. Because if he tears the house down, it's a pretty straightforward commercial site plan application. We'll bring access directly into the property off Queens Lane, which is currently the residential driveway. The site plan, we're at 40% total coverage. You're allowed 75% in a CI property. So if you take the house away, and the septic issue, take the house away, there's no issue. We're trying to preserve the house because a local family lives in it. And honestly, I'd like a little help. So that's where I am, and I appreciate you having the discussion about this. Thank you.
No, thank you for that and for your passion. All right, so I'm going to let this send this over to Lou. And
I don't think my passion will rise to the level that Rick just displayed, but it's pretty close. One of the things that I always hear from, just speaking at cocktail parties with, people who live in town is how frustrated things can get from a bureaucratic standpoint, going in front of the planning board or the zoning board. And then, from there, they spin all kinds of conspiracy theories about people being on the take and what have you. It's ridiculous. But and in some certain cases, it warrants taking careful consideration and time. But in other cases, it's just, and please, this is not, my criticism of the planning department, because one thing that I always tell people is what dedicated, passionate, considerate of the town's quality of life everyone on the planning department is. So anyway, all that to say that with regard to this case, it's officially that house is not affordable housing, but considering where it's located, it is affordable housing. I mean, no one's going to spend millions of dollars for that house or spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to rent it. So it's something that's available to people of lesser means. And to kick these poor people out and tear the house down is ridiculous given the facts of this case. Yes, 76 Queens Lane does require a site plan. There are some things that they were doing that weren't approved originally, like storing certain garbage receptacles or what have you. But those, like Rick said, are minor things. We went through this whole application about the storage of these porta potties. They're not cleaned on the site, so it doesn't require it doesn't endanger the environment in any way. I think, I think a new sanitary system should be put in. I think that I would interpret the law to say that this does require additional parking, which triggers a new sanitary system. And the other last point I want to make is, I don't get this whole precedent thing about, if we allow this if we approve this property, which is commercial industrial, to have a resident, it's going to affect all the other properties that are in similar situations. Why can't we just look at each individual case for its unique individual circumstances? Why does this set a precedent for everything else that all the other properties could have very different circumstances? So my hope is that we can do something so that this house does not get removed, that we can speed up the process so that they get approval, and that the zoning board does their job as soon as possible, so we can move on from this delay.
Thank you, Lou. I got to say, speaking for myself, I share your concern about the value of precedent. I mean, when I was on the ZBA, that was always a concern first and foremost, always establishing a precedent. But, when it comes to the, whatever it is, 25, 29 parcels in the town that fall under this anomaly of a residence on a commercial property, I think that we can look at each one independently without worrying that we're bound on the next one by what we did on this one. Because in my view, just think back to the one we did a week or two ago. The same situation on paper, but if you look at the properties, they're about as different as could be. So I hear where you're coming from there. All right, does anyone else want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in.
Go ahead.
I was reading this pamphlet this morning, and I was just like, what has changed? And Rick just said it, nothing has changed. I couldn't understand why we were hearing this again. And I share his frustration. I do think, this house should be preserved, and I hope, he can find.
If Rick has considered, it sounded like they wanted to go to the zoning board first, but if we modified the site plan for 76, then the zoning board's concern or objection to hearing the variant or dealing with the variance application might go away. So it's one thought that they submit a modification application for 76. The other thing is I agree with everybody else that it seems to me we had a good discussion with Eric about this issue at the last I think it was called Robertson right now we allow a detached affordable unit in the CI zone. We allow apartments over CI buildings in the CI zone. Mm-hmm. I don't see why maybe this is, I don't know if Nancy is still on, but if it might be a relatively modest code amendment to allow us to grant a special permit for a detached affordable unit that is existing in the CI zones, not just new ones, and not just new ones over the building, but existing single-family homes that we could issue a special permit for a detached unit, which is already allowed. It does raise the question of would the applicant here, and would the applicant in some of our other examples, be willing to put this house in the town affordable housing program, which would be necessary if we were approving a new detached unit or apartments over a CI building. They would have to be in the town program and go through the town housing office for tenants. Not sure exactly how we would handle ownership.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm not sure if they can stay.
What do you mean, the people who are in there?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So maybe
Well, they'd
I
have
don't know. I'm just thinking that it does seem like allowing us by special permit to allow the residential use in CI, just like we can allow a detached affordable unit, might be a code amendment worth looking at.
Let me ask, can I ask a question? I'm trying to ask the board a question. If this house stays where it is, it's going to be, in terms of a residence, it's going to be very constrained. There's going to be a very active commercial use immediately behind it. I mean, you look at that, where that fence is, and you look at where that house is, and you're going to have trucks coming and going, on a daily basis, loading and unloading the porta sands. And, you have a house that's right on top of that. And, I'm not saying anything conclusive on my part, but it's something I think it's worth at least, taking into account is the commercial use that's going on adjacent to this residential use. That's one of the reasons I say that, I think each of these has to be viewed independently. I mean, look, I'm not in the housing business, and I'm not on the committee that Randy's on, and I understand certainly the priority of and the necessity for affordable housing. There's no getting around that. But, is every house, I mean, is every house, is it an appropriate place for a house? I guess is the question. And
well, if we had a special permit, we had to issue a special permit and make certain findings. It might address what you're saying. Are the uses compatible? Is the commercial use compatible with the detached unit?
Can I offer some comments?
let me have the board talk, and I'll certainly give you an opportunity.
Sure thing.
I was just going to say, I think the question that you posed, Sam, whether this house as a dwelling unit is appropriate on this site, has already been answered. And it's been answered by the many years, I don't know how many, that those residents have lived there. So, and I've been to the site, and you get a much better feel when you're, walking around. Yeah, it's in the middle of a commercial industrial property. The trucks, I understand, are going to come in the morning and then in the evening. And that fence around the house sort of buffers the rest of the property. So it's not the most ideal place. And like I say, it's not a house that someone would pay tens of thousands of dollars to rent. But, for certain people, I think it's whether to live in East Hampton and live there. I think that the choice is very easy for them to make.
Oh, no, I'm not, Lou, I get it. Believe me, I get it. I'm not minimizing. It's just, it's something that, I do think it's something the board should take into account in its conversation. Michael, I don't think, would you like to chime in on this? Michael?
I'm here.
Okay.
This again, I'm the newest member of this board. I have not seen this. How tall is that fence? If it's a 6-foot fence and you have these trucks that are beyond 6 feet, you're going to be exposed to a lot of activity, morning, noon, and night. And then you have. Now you can reassure me all you want about porta-johns being, not smelling to some degree. You can. I don't buy that. I honestly do not buy that. I agree. I understand the Dr. Gandy cleaning there, but boy, it's just it's difficult to reconcile all this commercial business mere feet from the back of the house. Now, believe me, I am well aware of the importance, the critical issue that housing is. Thank you very much. That might help me. Of affordable housing, and I don't like seeing any house torn down. I think more needs to be done to separate trucks and porta-johns from a residence. Yeah, that's a 6-foot stockade fence. Is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah, I believe it's 6-foot stockade. Yes, there you go.
That's the back of the house.
Yep.
Well, what comments do we want to send to the zoning board, folks? I'm gonna ask Lou to start to kind of lead us on.
Oh,
Wait, do you want to? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to respond.
Yeah. I didn't mean to step on your opportunity. Go ahead.
Well, just because Randy had a couple ideas, I want to respond to them. First of all, we don't really want to do an amendment to 76 Queens Lane right now. We want to get a variance or not get the variance. We get denied the variance, then I presume the house will come down. But I don't think there are any, the issue with 76 Queens Lane is the applicant's not in strict compliance with the site plan. Mainly, it has to do with, landscaping. Some things have been removed or cleared that weren't supposed to be cleared. I don't think it's not resolvable. So the most important thing is to get to the zoning board and get a variance or not get a variance, because then that informs everything that comes afterwards. As far as a special permit for the existing house, Randy, I'll be honest with you, I don't really understand your recommendation. The existing house is a legally pre-existing structure. They don't need a special permit to keep it. So there's no point in going through special permit review for a residence that is there right now. And lastly, as far as the affordable, and Marco's photos are very informative there. This is, and I've been around the house too, obviously. I've been to the property a couple times. The house is not unlivable. You can live there. It's certainly not ideal for most people, because you're right on top of commercial use. I mean, that after all, that's what zoning is about. Theoretically, we want to separate residential uses and commercial uses, for the betterment of the residential resident. But, this being East Hampton, the house is a livable house, and East Hampton's housing is just so dire that somebody will want to live there. I mean, it's a livable place, not ideal. As far as putting it in the affordable housing program, I would never recommend to my client that he put the house in the affordable housing for 2 reasons. Number one, it's completely unnecessary. We all know you can't rent this place for even $20,000 a month during the summer, which, by the way, these days seems to be a low rent. You just can't. This is not something that will appeal to summer renters. And as far as renting it, selling it as a house, again, you're selling the commercial property, you're not selling the house. So there's no need to put it in an affordable housing program. By its very nature, it's affordable housing. So subjecting it to some town program is unnecessary. That's what it is. I mean, we have to make a decision. You have to make a decision whether or not to help us keep the house, because eventually the commercial property is so valuable that the landowner, and he's renting other property right now to keep his business afloat because he can't use this property because he's maintaining a house in the middle of it. At a certain point, economically, he's not going to have a choice. So those are my comments. Thank you for listening.
Okay. I appreciate it. Again, Lou, let's see if we can't give a little bit of focus.
I think you know where I stand on this, and my recommendation to the zoning board is to grant the variance. As far as, the issue of residents living in the middle of a commercial industrial site, I'm not going to say no matter how inhospitable it is to, I won't go that far, but in my assessment of this type of business, I think it's more important that these people, this couple with the niece, get to keep their living quarters than us making a decision to tell them this is not a place you should be living. So go find someplace else, and you may not be able to find a place in East Hampton because you can't find affordable housing. So that's my position, and I think that the variance should be granted.
Okay, I'm going to go around the table and just see how we feel about granting the variance, because that really, when you get down to it, Lou, that is the question here. I'll go from. I don't even remember how left and right goes anymore. Sharon, I'll start with you. I know where you are.
Yeah, I'm definitely for granting this variance if we can.
Yeah, okay. Randy? That's a good comment for the town board, which is our other question.
Understood.
I can see that. I like the flexibility that gives us.
Given the unique circumstances here, I would agree that we support the variance, and I also like Michael's comment that it'd be nice if there could be some better physical separation, whether it's a green, whether it's trees or a better fence or I don't know what. But I think it would be nice to have better separation between the back of the house and the commercial use.
Yeah. Michael?
I agree with Lou.
Okay. I'm going to round it out. Lou, you really, I was saying that Mr. Whalen spoke passionately. So did you. And I'm persuaded by it. I really am. I mean, it really does boil down to, are we going to tell some folks that, sorry, go find someplace else to live. So I think you've got unanimity on this board in support of the variance, Mr. Whalen. And
thank you all. Thank you very much.
And I think that also Randy's suggestion about special permitting these circumstances. I mean, we may need to talk to Nancy a little bit about whether or not it's viable, but I do think that special permitting these circumstances gives us the ability to look at each one individually and address the needs of the owner and the uses to which that particular parcel is being put. So that responds, I think, to both. Unless anyone wants to add with respect to the comments to the town, I think that covers everything we had on this, what really is an important application. So,
thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Okay, we've got one more matter on site plan, and that is Tuchillo special permit modification application. Again, this is the Marco covering this on the planning department, and Lou covering the planning board. And Ms. Van John, you're the applicant's representative?
Yes, okay. I'm here.
Okay, so go right ahead, Marco.
Yes, so this is very simple. The application was to, excuse me, sorry, find myself here. But this was to alter site plan approval that was granted previously to expand a pre-existing non-conforming single-family residence. The alterations for that to be moving it 7 feet further landward than what was originally approved from the Bluff Coast. The applicant has submitted an actual site plan that's stamped and licensed and a revised sanitary plan. In addition, 1,754 square foot scenic easement is also proposed over the majority of areas to be revegetated. That was also proposed by the applicant as requested by the planning board. And the planning board should discuss if any additional information should be submitted. Outside of that, the modification would also need approval from the ZBA on their side. And they are pending review. Other than that, the modification for the planning board is complete and ready for approval. You may wish to discuss any additional information that should be submitted.
Very well. Thank you very much. Ms. Van John, do you have anything you'd like to add on this?
No, I think Marco summed it up pretty well. At the last meeting, this board had asked us to consider a scenic easement. So we went ahead and proposed that. And that's on our most recent submission. Other than that, we're just waiting for our modification to go through at the zoning board. But I'm available if anyone has any questions, but I don't think I have anything else.
Very well. Okay, Lou.
Yeah, no, I don't have any issues with this. I'm, fine with it. I'm for approval. I just have one question. I passed by the site yesterday, and it looks like this is a question for the applicant. It looks like they've already started construction. I mean, it looks like they're already doing what they're asking for approval.
Yes, we did hear from code enforcement. Apparently, someone may have jumped the gun over there, but code enforcement has issued a stop work order and everything should be on pause until everything is processed at this point.
Oh, in that case, then I vote not to approve this. And no, I'm just kidding.
The good thing you said it as quickly as you did, Lou. They're not kidding part I'm talking about. Well, let me ask, does anybody vote? I was going to let it just slide by, but does anyone have any issues with saying that this now is complete and ready for approval?
Marco, do you have an aerial? Just a quick look at an aerial.
Photograph, you mean? Yeah.
Of this aerial photo.
Yeah. It's always helpful. There we go. Can you draw it back a little bit there? Thanks. That's fine. So revelatory.
So basically you're moving the building back from the ocean, right? Is that?
Yeah. The house is being reconstructed, moving back. And after this board's request from a few months ago, we're now proposing a scenic easement along the area, along the ocean. So it's pretty much a win-win for everyone, moving everything back, establishing a scenic easement. Yeah.
Well, this is one of those picture paints 1,000 words. Do we all agree? Does anyone disagree that this application is complete, ready for approval? Anyone? There you go. Hearing none, this application is complete and ready for approval.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, that concludes the work session portion of our meeting. We will now turn to our regular meeting. I should add, I'm going to do the board review first. When we read the motions, the resolutions, we'll take a breath before taking a second, because last time out, we went very quickly into reading the resolution and seconding, and that precluded one of the members from being able to say something. So, Nancy, if I'm doing that, if that's the way to do it, to make sure that folks can be heard.
Yeah,
So,
that would be the time.
Okay, I know we're all anxious to say second, but let's take a breath before we do, just so that if somebody has a comment before we have a seconded motion to vote on. All right, but first, in the matter of the Board of Review, the request of James Chiamillo for a building permit on the premises at 1 Wooded Oak Lane in East Hampton. Portions of lot 15, portion of lot 16, portion of lot 29, portion of lot 29 again. We might want to check that, make sure that that's accurate. Portion of Kimball Avenue and 1728. Suffolk County Tax Map 300-140-1.73. I've read the Board of Review and the notes and the engineer, and the amount of the undertaking is $17,000, and I move for the approval of this Board of Review. Is there a second?
Discussion.
Thank what? Do you have a discussion? Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much, Michael. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 5-0. Thank you. Okay, the next one is, we put this in, we put it in for Mosswood. Mosswood is first, and, oh my, Ian is doing both, which means I'll do both. So, all right, in the matter of the application of Beckman Commercial Building Site Plan, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-181-4-12, I've read the motion for an extension of time, which extends the time to comply with the conditions of the board's resolution for 1 year to obtain a building permit or until January 28th, 2023. I move for its adoption. Any comments before asking for a second? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 5-0. Next. That was Beckman. I just read Beckman first. Okay. All right. I may have said Mosswood, but I read Beckman. In the matter of the application of Mosswood preliminary subdivision for an extension of time, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-157-2-15.3-16. A motion, the extension is the time within which the applicant must comply with the conditions of the board's resolution for a period of 1 year or until April 3rd, 2023. I move for its adoption. Any comment? Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 5-0. Thank you very much. All right, with that, at 8:25 p.m., does anyone have anything they wish to add before we wrap for the week? Okay, in that case, Nancy, we're not sure, right? We still don't know whether we're going to be live and in person or if we will remain in these comfortable confines.
Yeah, hopefully tomorrow we'll get some more guidance.
Okay, well, tell the governor I want to know.
All right, I will.
There's a new variant going around.
I hope you're joking.
No, I'm not. It's called B2, I think.
B2.
Oh, no.
Well, they ran out of Greek letters. Now they're back to English.
I don't know. It's an offshoot of Omicron. So.
Oh man.
Well, all right. Well, I'm going to refrain from any politicizing. Less political I'm going to be is that the fact that I wore a yellow and blue tie tonight. So,
Well done.
Go Ukraine.
No, that's my subtle way of doing this. I'd wear a T-shirt like the president of Ukraine. That would be but I'm not that great.
When the planning board comes under siege,
Yeah.
we're attacked.
Thank you.
We'll have you in
I'll
a
be
T-shirt.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. All right, can we get our motion to adjourn? Someone?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passed 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. And thank you, LTV. And
Nice.
thank you, Joe.
See you
Take
next
care.
week.
Thank you,
You're very
planning
welcome.
department. Great work.
It's done.